Good morning, and good morning. Running a little late this morning. Running a little late, but I apologize for that. What, 6 minutes, 6 minutes? I usually like being on time, but today just had a slight interruption. But anyway, today, we're going to talk about the right that we can exercise on November 3rd, which is to vote. To vote. That's what we're going to discuss today. I tell you, every day I get something that gets down in my spirit as to what I'm supposed to discuss. And for some reason, good morning, Kawanas. For some reason, this issue came up, and it was just, you know, all day yesterday, just kind of playing out through the TV, through the text messaging, through different things that just said, you know what, we must, at least encourage. We must encourage people to exercise their right to vote. And, it is a privilege. I know that I told you before that my parents didn't have that privilege when they were younger. But once they got it, they certainly exercised it. And they would also discuss it, because as I said, I was always a nosy kid. So I would say, why? And then they would always, my dad always took me with him. He and my mother would like not necessarily go together because my dad worked and my mom didn't. So my mom went right after she dropped us off at school. But my dad took us actually with him to the poll later on. And so we got to see the process. And, the process in motion is interesting, And so it was, I don't know. I always would just sit in awe and just watch people going in, and as I said, I would always ask the questions as to why was this so important. And of course, he would say that we're electing this office or that office, and I remember there being such you know, a big to do about the office of the presidency and the vice presidency. So that certainly became, really huge in our house. And I remember the election night and a lot of people coming by, and sometimes they would, organize little dinners and stuff. Good morning, Joan, to watch the results. And I think they do that now, but of course this year will certainly be different than 4 years ago, or when, in 2008, when, they said the election was just electrifying to absolutely vote in the first African American president. So, now let's see what's happening. Let's see what's happening on this year to vote, that it becomes extremely important to vote. And I don't know, I just, the news yesterday was just kind of disturbing to me with the Michigan governor being, basically, placed in a position to say, to be told by the FBI that she was going to be, there was a plot to kidnap her, hold on to her, and then of course torture and kill her. So, what's left? What is left? If there's some scariness going on in the country, because usually when you think of terrorists, you don't think of domestic terrorists, but then you do when you think of some of the things that have happened, like in Oklahoma, or in North Carolina, or all these places where things have happened, that just says that people can get twisted in their minds, and they connect with other people who are also twisted, and then you come up with some of what I call real dangerous planning. And then if it's not caught, then it's dangerous actions that take place, and people lose their lives, or they're maimed for life, with an affliction of some sort from bullets or whatever. So we just need to really look at what's next. So anyway, when we talk about the vote, and before I get too far along, I will ask you, are you stuck? Yes, personally, I think the country is stuck. The country is stuck because we've certainly been, actually, having some things revealed to us on race, on, basically, discrimination on so many levels, on, some, bad police among the good police, and, death in front of our eyes, just so many things we have been able to see. And then, a president, obviously, now having the COVID virus and not sure of where he really stands, but he's ready to go back out there to campaign again. So, there's a lot of questions, a lot of what I would say uncertainty. So certainly we are stuck. We are stuck, and I'm hoping that the votes will certainly just give people the right to say something. And even though the Electoral College comes into play, we also have to say, but I did have an opportunity to put in my vote. That was my say-so. That was my 2 cents. So anyway, this vote is by Amy Ludwig van der Water. Let me say it all together. Amy Ludwig van der Water is the owner and copyright of this I Vote. So here's the poem. I vote. There are times in my life I do not have a choice. No one asks what I think. No one hears my small voice. But elections are different. I live in a land where we each have a vote. So I must understand the plans of each candidate hoping to lead. I ask myself questions. I watch and I read. The more that I study, the more facts I find. I ask myself questions. I might change my mind. And sometimes a friend or person I trust has a different opinion. I listen. I must. My vote is my privilege, my duty, my right. I need not be a man or wealthy or white. I just need to think and show up in November. It was not always this way. I vote. I remember. So to me, this poem kind of sang to me yesterday. It had bells and whistles on it when I first read it. And I said, wow, here's, a woman that basically in her discussion of what voting is for her, she says that she remembers the times, not meaning that she just necessarily experienced it herself, but she remembers history. She remembers history. Women didn't get to vote, until many years after, only basically white men voted. Slavery ushered in the fact that blacks were not allowed to vote because we were not considered real citizens. And so that was an issue. And then finally in 1963, with the Civil Rights Acts and all of that, yes, that's when a lot of voting came into happening, So we have to be thankful for those of us who've been able to see it in our lifetime where change came and we were a part of that change. And then we were also able to use what the change brought about to make it so that we could vote. And so I don't take it lightly. Every time voting comes around, I try to get a cheat sheet to read up on who is running, because it's not just that top office. You also have to look at what judges are out there, what judges are absolutely running, because judges are powerful, because they can basically change lives. They can make it where a life that has been, started in something small ends up paying the price for years and years and years behind bars, or maybe they didn't do it at all. But, we have to look at that. We have to pay attention to what's happening. Who else is on the ballot? Who else is running for office? Not just the high offices, but the local offices. Who's running for your sheriff? Who's running as, for some of your congressional seats, your local congressmen, congress personnel. Who else is running? Who else is out there? Who's running for ECUA, your utilities board? And the thing about it is that these boards, these commissions, they're powerful because they affect how you live day to day. Now, there's an overarching overarching effect of what happens from the level of the office of president, the federal level. But you also have the county level, hats off to the dad of taking you to the polls. History is so important, and many times we take our progress and lessons learned for granted. Amen. Amen. Because, we don't always tell the story. And sometimes we don't even know enough about the story to get into it ourselves. But if we really understood our history and the fact that we were denied something that now we're granted to do, to me, that's important. Because once you do it, then you're certainly setting an example for it to be done by others. Good morning, T. So I'm going to vote. Absolutely, I'm going to vote. And the decision will be, if you all elect to vote this year, that will it be an early vote? If they have the opportunity, will it be an absentee vote, or will it be an in-person vote? And understanding what coronavirus is and what it has done to almost, I think they said 212,000 people. That's scary stuff. And they're saying now with the cold weather coming in and people are forced to be inside more, they're thinking that we may have up to another 30,000 or 40,000 people falling victim to death of the virus. You got to vote. You just got to vote. But anyway, let me go on. So when we talk about voting, we want to talk about what voting is. What is it to vote? And vote, it says, is a formal indication of a choice between two or more candidates or courses of action, expressed typically through a ballot or show of hands or by voice. Thank goodness we're not doing a show of hands, because everybody would be blind. They couldn't see all the hands up there. So thank goodness it's not that way. But it says or by voice, saying I, and sometimes if you're in a small group of people where a vote is necessary, then that's how they would do that. But they talk about the vote being the ballot. Who's on the ballot? Who's taking the poll? When the election is, referendum, looking at what things needed to be changed, the polling, the general election, that's going to be, the big one, the big girl, big boy kind of thing. Popular vote, straw poll, show of hands, and voting. All those things have to do what voting does and what voting is. And some people have never voted. And they're in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s. Some of them have lived long enough to see who couldn't vote, and when they were given the right, they chose not to. So there you go. So anyway, I want to talk some more in depth about what I have seen that vote to vote has done, especially the last probably 12 years. Past 12 years have been crazy. But the V is for vicious. I think voting, sometimes the sides become vicious towards each other, and it makes it where it rears its ugly head in other things, where people believe it so much where they're willing to be called to action, such as the supremacist groups, where they don't even care, and where you had the Black Lives Matter group, and other people were infiltrating them to give the impression that the Black Lives Matter were doing some of the same things that the other groups were really there to steal, to loot, to do all those things, to really riot and not be peaceful. So that's scary. So the viciousness of it is deliberate cruelty. It could be violence, could be aggressive and angry behavior. But viciousness really talks about something being malice, being spiteful, acute, almighty, blistering, deep, dreadful, excruciating, explosive, fearful, fierceness, frightful, furious, ghastly, hard, heavy, hellacious. I like that word, hellacious, intense, profound, terrible, venomous. That's another good word. Violent. Those could be other V's for voting, for the whole the whole process of voting. But this isn't new, what we're going through. This has been going on since the probably the voting began years and years and years ago. They become tunnel vision. That's right. They become that. Yes, they have tunnel vision. Absolutely. It says it's corrupt. Come on now. Corrupt, highly reprehensible, highly offensive, highly destructive. Okay? It's just unbelievable. And it says it has the absence of any signs of fairness. I'm going to say that again. At times it has the absence of any kind of fairness. Interesting stuff. Interesting. Wow, what have you seen lately? Okay, and even if you turn the TV off, it doesn't mean it's not happening. Even if you don't have the radio, even if you're not on social media, things are still happening, which is scary stuff. So then we talk about the O of vote. Now, here's what I put down for the O of vote, which is obligating. That's only if you take on the obligation, because you can be obligated to do stuff and never get around to it. They can send you a letter that is certified, but if you never signed for it, guess what? You didn't get it. Come on now. You didn't get it. You didn't go pick it up, and you never answered the door when it was told that you have a letter to come get. You don't go get it. So obligating means to bind or compel, especially legally or morally. Meaning that you morally have decided you're going to vote, or you morally decided, good morning, Maurice, that you decided that there's some things that you don't want to go forward on into the next, administration in the White House, or the next administration, top level folks in your police department, or at your utilities, agency. So there's always a way, and sometimes you have to look at even the finer print, the amendments. Sometimes you don't even realize that some of your rights have been taken away only because you never knew what the amendments were amending. Come on now. A lot of times we've been subject to stuff and we don't even know about it because we don't listen for it, we don't read it, we don't ask questions, and we go in only with the top, what I would call the top things in the front portion of our brain of things we need to act on, not realizing that the baby hairs at the bottom, okay, are really going to be the ones that tickle your throat and get into your psyche later on, because you realize you missed it. You missed it. You missed the fact that this amendment says, you no longer have the right to do so and so and so. And a lot of times that's how legislation is put forward. When I worked with the VA, as a loan from the Department of Defense, what I found out is that, I had gone to Washington a few times to do what they call murder boards. And murder boards is when you actually build people up. You take, say they're an undersecretary and they have to go speak on a subject that you're an expert on, which is what I was. So when I went to their office to speak with the undersecretary, I told them things that they needed to address, such as, it was going to be, this area and it had to be addressed in this way about this, number of people that will be affected by what it is they're discussing. And it was very interesting, but the murder board is to prepare them. Well, when the actual legislation came out, you had to actually, hunt for it in the legislation, only because when they pass legislation, it doesn't just have the overarching layer of what they were trying to get out there. Okay, there was other stuff, and it was buried. It was buried so far down into the document that you had to remember. Okay, this is such and such 106.419. Okay, what happened to 106.01? That's the way they do it. So you really have to look for it. 106.419, that meant there were 418 other things that were either more important or got more light and showed up in the document sooner than the thing that you were working on, even though they give a lot of attention to it in terms of preparing someone to speak on it, or on the Hill to go in and speak before Congress, because that's basically what I did. But you never know that, because by the time it hits what the legislation bureau is going to take out, it becomes that only 2 or 3 sentences. Good morning, Jean. It says, I have seen a replay of yesteryear, Jim Crow's ugly spirit flowing all over again. Absolutely. And it does say history repeats itself. We have to understand that who we are is what we do with what we see. But a lot of times we remain silent because we let the voices that are speaking become louder and louder and louder. And the people, even if they may be, a minority of people, they become dominant only because they're willing to step out. They're willing to take the chances. I'm quite sure that those 13 men that decided that they were going to, get the explosives, set them off, buy a taser, do all these things that they did, that they said that the FBI had been absolutely monitoring them since March of this year. That's when the pandemic started. So they never left monitoring them. They still made them a priority. Even though in the news it sounded like nothing was being done, that everything around the country was, chaotic, because the FBI is out of control, the police are out of control, and all of the people are out of control. And then you have to ask yourself, who was in control? Just saying. So anyway, the next thing we're going to talk about is, understanding what, and I need to go back to finish this, what, being obligatory is. It means you're being obliged. Basically, you're bound and compelled to do something. You're obliged to do it. You feel compelled to do it. You're committed to it. You're bound to it. You're beholden to it. You broadened it. You indebted to it. You're appreciative of the fact that you're doing something. You're grateful, and then you're also thankful. That is what being obligating is all about. You've obligated yourself to make sure that your voice is heard because you're going to vote. So that is the O of the VO of vote. The vote. So let's move on to T. T, I chose term. Now, term, they can have terms being the conditions of what someone works under. But in this case, we're talking about term. We're talking about time, a period. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So it says it's a fixed or limited period for which someone or something is in office. It might be imprisonment, investments, and how long they last or are intended to last. Wow. So there's a period in term. There's a spell, a stint, a duration, an interval, a stretch, a run, a phase. Incumbency. I always like that word, incumbency. The incumbent, okay, the administration, and the term of office all speak to what term is. So when we vote people in, we can't just think about what they said today, but what they said today, how truthful was that, so that when it comes back up for them to serve a term again, do we vote them in again? Good morning. Good morning, Trisha. Or do we have to make another change? So term is really important. We need to know how long people are going to be around. you know. And let's face it, in some instances, people are there for 3 years, some years two, sometimes 4. 4 is a long period of time, you know. 4 years is a long period of time, you know. Always, my mother would always give us this scenario when talking about time. And so we would always say, well, Mom, when we gonna do so and so and so? She said, well, what if I popped you all those times that you keep asking until we get to the time for us to go, or the time for us to do this and that and the other thing. And so we stopped asking. After a while, we said, no, that's okay. We won't ask you about how long before we get there or what we're going to do and everything, because my mother just realized that time, you had to work through what time meant for you. And at the time, she couldn't tell us everything that she thought or believed, you know, because I would always ask questions. So how long are they in office? And what are they going to do, you know? And, you know, when she got fed up of answering me, she would say, just write some things. Go over there and write some things down of what you think, and then I'll talk about it. So actually, my mother didn't realize it. My mother only had an 8th grade education, but she was born in the South, and her education only went to the 8th grade. That's all she had to do. But my mother was a brilliant woman. My mother always said was a doctor without having the right words, and always, you know, and didn't always use them in the correct format. But she was brilliant. She was brilliant. And I always knew that. I always knew that listening to her, that I was getting wise information. And she could read and she could write. In fact, I've been going through the tossing out of stuff, and I found her some of the letters that she wrote. Well, those I kept. Now, a lot of other stuff, yes, I got rid of. But those I kept because she just had, you know, an original way of just writing stuff that just said, wow, that's just cute. That is a cute way of writing. But she understood what term meant. Good morning, Lawson, my little nephew. She knew what term meant, and she would always try to explain it for us. She said, oh, yeah, well, they're in for 3 years, they're in for 4 years, they're in for 6 years, you know. And once again, she would try to let us understand what it meant to vote, because she took pride in it. She said, I know what it is not to be able to vote. So when I got the right to vote, I'm going down here to vote. And that's what I'm going to do. So the E of VOTE, vote, is election. That's what we're getting ready to do, is go through this election process. And it says election is a formal and organized choice by the vote of a person for a political office or other position. See, so basically that's what we're doing. We're doing that on November 3rd, is to really look at casting our own ballot, voting for who we believe will do the best for ourselves and our fellow Americans. So anyway, it talks about Paul. It says, I love the way you admire your mom. Always love your. Thank you so much. You would have loved it too. She cussed though. That's the only difference. I didn't give that to everybody right away. I think periodically I might have said it, but she periodically let a few things out. Now she'd have been cussing a lot right now, but anyway, we always thought it was funny, okay? Because she put things together, didn't go together. But anyway, to be a part of an election process, you're really looking at, you know, what a general election is all about, what the popular vote is all about, what it could be if people just show their hands and not really deal with the real issues. And it says picking and selecting and appointing someone to office is vital, because even though you might be doing it today, but it has what they say, long legs. You know, anytime somebody that goes in today stays 4 years, they go in today stays 3 years or 2 years. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And so, and you know, and I know some boards, they even stagger when people come in so that they're not left flat-footed with not having enough people on the board that's still familiarized. They're familiar enough with the information that there's not going to be, a problem of them running the board as they usually will. So those are what I would certainly look at. When I'm looking at voting, I'm looking at the viciousness of it. I'm looking at how obligated we are to even be a part of the process. Looking at the term, the number of years, and what is required in those number of years for someone to do. And of course, the whole electoral process that we are as Americans have the right to do, which is to go and exercise our own vote. So here's a few questions. Here are a few questions. Question number 1. You don't have to put it in the thread, but if you want to, you can. First thing, will you be voting this year? Will you be voting this year on November 3rd? Will you be voting? That's question number 1. Question number 2. Will you be voting by absentee or in person if you are voting? Absentee or in person? And then the last one, will you vote early if there's an open period, or will you wait and vote on election day? I never liked voting, and growing up in New York, and where I always voted, I remember election day just being crazy. But I worked for the state government in New York, and they gave us half a day off to go vote, or at least an extra hour or two to go to our own area, our own precinct area, and cast our vote, and then we could come back to work. And we could do it, early, delay coming in, because generally they opened at 7, the voting polls, or we could leave earlier in the evening, the 2 hours in the evening, and it would not be counted against us as, time, that leave time. And so that's how we were able to vote. Okay, yes, in person early. Yes, I'm doing mine. Yes, in person, and it will be early. I'm just like Gloria. I'm going early. I don't really want to deal with it election day. And I've always watched, the night, election night. It's always been interesting to me to see how things go. And, when I was, working in education in the, what I would call the younger grades, the grades K through, well, not so much K, but like the middle grades, I would always like to sometimes do a project. And the projects were interesting, where I'd ask them, if you have a candidate, I want you to follow your candidate, learn about them. What is it that they are going to bring, to the stage? I prefer to vote in person, and I will vote early if possible. Yes. We have already voted. Okay, carried our mail-in down to the electoral. Where is that office at, Joan? Can you do it right down there on Palafox? Not sure. You can put that in the thread so other people could know. We were talking about that yesterday in my Rotary meeting, and we weren't sure where you actually take your early ballot to. We were unsure, and I know people have already done it. I just didn't know where it's being done at. But for me, I will be sitting and listening. I will be there with open ears, open eyes, and I believe it's going to run late in the night. And so therefore I may have to take me a power nap, about 1 or 2 o'clock, just an hour, just so I can stay up a little bit longer that night and see what's going on. But anyway, that is our discussion for today. It is all about voting. It is all about what I would say exercising your right to do that, realizing the importance of it, making it possible for you to be a part of whatever happens, being a part of that. And, what I would certainly say is let's do it. Let's do it. I'm going to see you Monday. I want you to have a safe weekend. I want you to think about if you've already voted, just keep watching. For those who know they need to vote, make yourself a little bit more knowledgeable about who's in the running. Even what I call the baby hairs at the bottom, those amendments, pay attention to them. Those judges, pay attention to them, because they may affect someone or even yourself as you're going through a tough time or a period that just says change has happened and I didn't know it was coming. So make yourself aware, okay? Enjoy your weekend. I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm going to see you on Monday. Be safe. Oh, and wear your mask. Maurice, here's my mask. I did finally find it. And this is what it looks like. So instead of using the regular hoops, the loop that comes around on each of the ends, I take them apart and I run it through from the top side over to the other top side and down in. And then that way, so it is on Palafox. A box is outside. You can take it inside to the electro. Okay, so I did have it right. I said that, but somebody else told me no, I couldn't do that. But anyway, here's how the knot, I just knot them on the end and put this, and then that way it sits up here and not stress my ears out. So that's how the mask is done. Do wear your mask, okay? Do cover up. If you need gloves, wear them. Wash your hands. Keep your distance. In fact, add a few feet, okay? Love you, love you, love you. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.